Welcome to History According to Bob. This is a visual podcast. It won't have video in it. It will have slides that I'm going to talk about. And this one is about the types of nuclear weapons, the types of bombs. It'll also talk about nuclear testing and give you an idea to see what I've been talking about previously. Now here is the four main types. The gun type, the fission bomb, which is little boy. The implosion type, which is fat man. Fusion type hydrogen bomb. And then the ER, the enhanced radiation bomb, which is a neutron bomb. Well, I don't have a picture of neutron bombs. I still have a drawing of what they're supposed to look like, but that secret will remain safe for our government. Here you have a cutaway drawing of what little boy looked like, 20 kilotons. And when they talk about gun type, here you have a target wedge of uranium here. And when it explodes, what happens is there's a regular explosion which fires the target wedge into the uranium target. At that point, it begins the chain reaction. And you can see it's 10 feet long. It's actually 28 inches in diameter. And the tail fin is 2 feet and 4 inches. This is what it actually looks like. This is a mock-up that was in the museum in Albuquerque on the atomic energy. It's a perfectly accurate replica. They would have had to have had some just for practice, to practice loading them in. And then this shows from one of the picture planes and recording planes the explosion from that particular bomb at Hiroshima, which is 20 kilotons. Then here's the cutaway view of Fat Man, the 20 kilotons also. And you see it's a little bit bigger. It's 60 inches in diameter, 10 feet 8 inches, with the tail fin 5 feet in height. And then they have the beryllium polonium core, and then the other devices. And then, of course, this is what it looks like. And you see it's gigantic. These are the antennas that come out on the side of it. You can see why they called it Fat Man. And again, it was all that a B-29 could do, is to carry just one of these. And, of course, this is what was dropped on Nagasaki. And this is the famous shot showing the mushroom cloud over Nagasaki, which did not have as much damage because it was off target, because they had clouds, and it also has a broken terrain, and so that took out some of the blast effect. This is what a hydrogen explosion looks like. This is one of those from in the Bikini Atoll Eniwetok area. The famous colored pictures, the orange glow that they always talk about. This is an advertisement in a British magazine. And then you see it goes, what the hydrogen bomb does. And it shows if it was dropped in one part of England where the fallout would then go across. So it's talking about civil defense. This is more or less what we use today. This is a cutaway shot of the hydrogen bomb that we use, 1 megatons, 1 million tons of TNT. And you see they have lithium deuteride, uranium-238, other fissionable devices. There are all sorts of other stuff, plutonium and whatever goes into those. Now this was the largest hydrogen weapon that we have created that could be dropped from a plane in the early 50s. You know, the Mark 17. I think this thing is 22 megatons, million tons of TNT. You know, in order to actually ignite a hydrogen weapon, you have to have a small regular atomic weapon to produce enough heat. Now this is a smaller one. This is the MK-39. Now this picture is taken in Amarillo, Texas, at one of the old air bases there, where they trained atomic crews to load various atomic weapons. So this place has the entire hangar full of all the different kinds of weapons that were utilized. Here's an example of the MK41, and there's my youngest daughter, Courtney, who did not realize when she was on this. It was a trip that we took out with. I took the two girls out before my oldest daughter got married on a kind of a father-daughter last vacation. She didn't realize that I would be using these pictures over and over and over again. Here we have one of the bombs placed on the U.S. bomber, and these fell off periodically. If you've ever listened to my old podcast I did many years ago called the Mars Bluff, that's a plane flew over a little place on the East Coast, and one of these things fell off and exploded. Not the nuclear part, but the regular explosion, and killed a bunch of chickens. But it was a problem. In the early years of broken arrows, these wouldn't fit inside the plane. They had to be fixed to the outside. So there's a limit to how many of these babies you could carry. And of course, this is the most famous. If you've never seen Dr. Strangelove, it's a bizarre film, but everybody usually remembers this, which is the last scene where Slim Pickens, in order to get this bomb to drop on the Soviet Union, had to get on and write it down until it exploded. So that's basically what you were seeing in the other pictures. And that site there in Amarillo had submarine launched. It had all kinds of other stuff as well. Now, I've talked about the nuclear club. This is the old one. As you can see, it doesn't include North Korea, and we've got to put North Korea in on this list. And we'll talk about that at another time. But this, again, shows the dates. The United States, 1944, has an A-bomb, and then 1/11/52, the H-bomb, and then there's the Soviet Union's atomic bomb, and Britain, France. See, China is 1964, India and Pakistan in the 1990s. And so that's our club. Israel, some people think, well, Israel claims they don't have any, but that's a crock. And then some pictures of nuclear testing, just to familiarize yourself with it. They show them all the time, but you don't usually see a graph like this. Now notice, the United States from 1950 through the 90s certainly tested a lot more devices, 1,030 of them, 215 in the atmosphere and 815 underground. Soviet Union, again, 219 in the air, 496 underground. Britain, and you can see France, China, India. But if you look, we eventually have a nuclear treaty that says testing should be all underground. So that's usually about 1963. And so here you see 60, 61, and 62. And look at all of these blasts that were done in 1962. And this era right in here is where almost all of these are done in the atmosphere. Now, in the United States, other than the small tactical nuclear devices that were tested, most of the stuff was underground, and we were out in the South Pacific. Soviet Union did it in Central. Soviet Union, China in the northern part of the Gobi Desert. But all of that debris gets tossed up into the air. And at a later podcast, and as well as a visual podcast, I'll talk about the results of that, because it is really scary what happened. And of course, these are from the various tests done in the Bikini Atoll and Eniwetok area. And of course, the amazing thing about this is that studies have been done, and the equivalent, just to give you an idea of how much testing was done in this area, it's the equivalent that if you had dropped a Hiroshima-style atomic weapon on this area every day for 20 years. That's the equal of the amount of megatonnage that was dropped off here. Now, you would assume that nothing can live here. Let me show you another shot of that. It's a little closer. Okay? And they have been back. And I saw a documentary where these people went diving into the ships, and they found some radiation, but not much. And they determined that the chemical mix in the water, that the chlorine had attached to most of that and had dissipated it. The problem was that there were some rock formations that were still very radioactive, particularly like the material they used for the cemeteries. and the palm trees. And what happened was the palm trees were taking in the cesium-137 as if it were potassium and putting it in the food. So there is, you don't want to eat the coconuts there, and you don't want to eat the crabs because the crabs end up with strontium-90. This is an underwater explosion. The Navy believed that if you were in these ships, you would be okay. The reality was they were all so heavily radiated that they had to be destroyed and sunk. And the ships that were supposed to go in and clean them off, they lost those as well. Now, one of the problems they had with these early hydrogen tests was they went off bigger than expected. Covered more territory, were much bigger than they had calculated, caused all kinds of problems. This is the famous aerial view where you see this. Practically every science fiction movie that shows these type of explosions will show this. And of course, one of the things too is all these ships had sheep and goats all over them, in them and around them, to see what happened. Of course, they all died, and they used them because their skin would burn similar to what a human being's would. This is from on land, because they have all these remote testing sites and photography and everything else. So you can usually find those. Now this is Yucca Flats. Yucca Flats is where we did a lot of our underground nuclear testing, and each one of these holes would be one of those. In and around Area 51 and places like that. The problem is that a lot of the radioactivity begins working itself to the surface. So a lot of these areas, it's really unsafe to even walk around on them at this point. And then I'll end this little video podcast with this picture. This is American tactical nuclear testing with the troops watching the nuclear artillery shell go off, and then they're going to maneuver around. And of course, these guys are all going to be receiving tremendous amounts of radiation. I've told you this before. One of my students, his grandfather was a commander, and they all snuck their wives out for one of these tests. And his grandmother was sick, couldn't go, and she's the only one of the commander's wives that didn't die of cancer. So, and at this time, they really didn't know how much you could do. They had to be prepared. The Chinese did it, the Russians did it, everybody did it. So in the end, this is just a little visual of what I've talked about before. So I hope you enjoyed this, and as always, don't forget to come by the website, summahistorica.com or historyacordingtobob.com, and ask a question, leave a comment, check out the CDs, and thank you very much.